Good morning, church. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, we see social distancing is becoming our new normal. While the term social distancing is still widely used, it may send the wrong message and contribute to social isolation. Social distancing sounds more like we have to be separate socially from our families, friends, and even church. Instead, we have to stay close to one another in whatever form we can take. While we miss our gesture of welcome in the church, such as shaking hands, and hugging, and smile to one another, I believe practicing a physical distance while trying our best to be connected socially and emotionally to stay close is the best way to keep lives safe in this pandemic. Today, through the story in Genesis, we see Abram, who tried his best to keep the lives of sojourners safe and show them radical hospitality. As you look into this story in the book of Genesis, I hope and pray that we can have wisdom on what it means to be people of hospitality. When Abram was sitting at the entrance of his tent, he saw 3 strangers standing. It was the hottest time of the day. He ran from his tent to greet them and bowed before them without a moment's hesitation. It's strange to see his action. He didn't wait to understand who they are. If we meet strangers, we keep the physical and social and emotional distance from them until we understand who they are and become comfortable. But Abram greeted them even though he wasn't so sure whether or not they were good people. For him, they were just exhausted sojourners on a hot day. He welcomed them without any doubt or concern. Abram said, "If I have found favor in your eyes, my Lord, do not pass your servant by." Indeed, he treated them like the Lord. He got some water so they could wash their feet. He made them rest under tree shades, and he suggested they get some food to refresh them on their way. Look at how he served them. He made Sarah knead and bake bread with their best flour, and he ran to the kettle pan and picked out a nice plump calf and gave it to the servant to hurry to prepare it. Then he got curds and milk, brought them with the calf that had been roasted, set the meal before them, and stood there under the tree while they are eating. He became a great servant. While reading Abram's story, I remembered a similar hospitality that my former roommates had shown to my family and me. It was 3 years ago when my sister and mom visited me from Korea to celebrate my commencement ceremony. My tiny room wasn't too big to accommodate them. Fortunately, I managed to book a small room through Airbnb near my home. And then my family came to the US. It seemed like my plan would go well. But I realized I booked a wrong date. I had to find another place for my family to stay. It was too late to book another Airbnb, and hotels were full of other visitors or too expensive. I shared my concern with my housemates. There were a couple who were my colleagues at BUSDHs. They suggested me to use their room. It didn't take a long time for them to make decision. They went to their friend's house, allowing my family to use their room. They cleaned the room before my family came and prepared for clean blankets and pillows. And they even left a diffuser. Their hospitality moved my family. As they opened their room, we were welcomed. They didn't ask why I didn't check the schedule thoroughly, nor question me why I made such horrible mistake. They just made their bathroom for my family from Korea. Whenever I think of their welcoming spirit, my heart gets warmed. And I ask myself, have I been such a person to my housemates or others? I cannot but confess God's grace, God's welcoming grace. Through God's welcoming grace, I was able to dream of becoming a person with a welcoming spirit. As God shows such grace, I was able to discern my calling to make a community of hospitality. Abram said, "Let me get you something to eat so you can be refreshed, and then you go on your way." Notice his personality. When people met Abram, they were refreshed, and then they could go on their ways. As Abram served them like Lord, they had a feeling of being accepted. As they experienced such a sense of being welcomed, being loved, they could go on their lives with strength. Please remember what Jesus said in John's Gospel, chapter 6. "This is the will of him who sent me, that I shall lose none of all those he has given me, but raise them up at the last day." Jesus understood that God's will is to save others and flourish lives. Likewise, when we know and experience that our lives are beloved and accepted by God, we can beautifully sustain our lives. As beloved ones, we can love and forgive others. I know embracing others is not easy at all. We become uncomfortable merely by a little difference. We from time to time are haunted by bad memories. And when we are continuously exposed to such bad memories of others, we lose our ability to see others as our friends. We begin considering them as potential rivals or enemy. Especially in this ongoing pandemic, we see others as potential virus carriers. But we need to ponder how God sent us our neighbors. We were in the love, hospitality, and support of our church family. We were able to experience God's love and grace through those who responded to God's first love. We do not exist here without others. Indeed, others are gifts. Others are gifts to us as they are carriers of God's grace and love, support, help, encouragement, peace, and you can name it. you can remember. Today's passage asks us to show hospitality towards others. The book of Genesis says the three strangers were God and God's messengers. Please remember, Abram called them his Lord. Lord. What does it mean? When Abram served his guests or existed, he was actually serving God. Likewise, serving our neighbors is a way to serve God. And for those who practice hospitality towards others, God promises blessings. Verse 10 talks about God's promised blessing. Let me read. Then one of them said, I will surely return to you about this time next year, and Sarah, your wife, will have a son. She will have a son. When Sarah was listening to such a promise at the tent, she laughed within herself. An old woman like me get pregnant with this old man? A year after, her laughter became joy and pleasure. They had Isaac as God had promised. God kept the promise. The book of Genesis shows that hospitality towards strangers has something to do with God's promised blessing. I don't mean that you will get pregnant when you feed strangers and provide for shelters. What I mean is that when Abram served those who are hungry and thirsty in the wilderness, his life became blessing. The blessings to save lives and to flourish lives of others. Showing hospitality is the way to drive, not only to others, but also for ourselves. Birth of Isaac is the sign of God's promised blessing for Abram. Please remember, flourishing lives is God's will. And saving lives is to glorify God. Showing hospitality towards others is a radical way to serve God. And for those who follow God, God not only gives blessings, but also reveals God's will. God shared a secret with Abram. The visitors were on their way to sweep away Sodom and Gomorrah, which were two notoriously sinful cities, and were destroyed by sulfur and fire due to their wickedness. The Lord said, shall I hide from Abram what I'm about to do? The Lord doesn't hide a plan to those who practice hospitality. We call it God's revelation. God reveals God's will not to those who say they have knowledge and power, but to those who humbly practice love. Humbly practice love. We know that Abraham tried his best to save people in Sodom and Gomorrah. If there were only 10 righteous people, the cities would not be destroyed. Some people think God destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah due to their sodomy, which means sexual behavior between same-sex relationship. And they use the story of Sodom and Gomorrah as their reference to judge and blame sexual minorities. But 2 cities were destroyed due to their lack of hospitality, lack of love, lack of justice. The Bible story teaches us to protect minorities, like the hunger, the weak, the thirsty, and injustice strangers. But ironically now, many people use the Bible to persecute them. In Sodom and Gomorrah, there were no 10 righteous people who practiced love and hospitality towards the weak. Verse 20 says, the outcry against Sodom and Gomorrah is so great and their sin so grievous that I will go down and see if what they have done is as bad as the outcry that has reached me. God heard the outcry from the oppressed in Sodom and Gomorrah. God showed God's plan to those with love and hospitality. But for those without love and hospitality, there will be God's divine judgment. I believe today's passage asks us to practice hospitality. Are we serving strangers as God? When we meet people, do we see hunger and thirst first in them? Or doubt who they are? Are we willing to feed the poor and help the needy? This passage asks us. This passage doesn't ask us if we have monetary resources and power to help others. Instead, it challenges us to make room in our minds for others. Hospitality is like a life with a roommate whose lifestyle is not like mine. Hospitality is like an act of opening their bedroom for their friends, family from a foreign country. Hospitality is like a practice of putting on shoes of the oppressed lives, like African American friends and undocumented immigrants. As we practice such hospitality, I hope and pray that we can remember Jesus, who loved and accepted us while we were still sinners. While we were still sinners, God showed God's first love. And we can remember our neighbors who didn't stop their support and help towards us. I know we see many needs in the world and we cannot satisfy them with our power, but I believe God will fill them with God's grace, God's love, God's grace, and they will be refreshed and then go on their ways. Amen.